A warm welcome to Lost for Words, a podcast sharing the opinions, glories, and interesting stories of guests. I am your host Jason, and this week I am joined by Jamie McGuire. Jamie is a politics and social public policy student at the University of Glasgow. A lifelong Labour supporter, he is the chair of the Glasgow Uni Labour Club and is a prominent face in his local Labour Party in Renfrewshire. Jamie recently attended the party conference in Brighton. He and I discussed that experience along with how the party will fare and are faring under Keir Starmer. We discussed the election of Anas Sarwar as Scottish Labour leader, the 2021 election, the Scottish Government and COVID recovery north of the border, as well as touching on the usual constitutional situation that we have up here. Jamie also makes an interesting and exciting revelation about his future in politics, so stay tuned. Jamie is wise and confident beyond his years and spoke expertly, even when I pushed back on some of the things that he was saying. I hope you enjoy this one. I will speak to you on the other side. A quick housekeeping note before we get started. Please leave a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple, Google, Spotify, Podbean or any other platform. It's the best way the podcast can grow and better content can be produced for you, the listener. It's your listening experience that matters the most. But enough from me, now on to today's episode of Lost for Words. Obviously you're a Labour Party member, but what is your earliest memory of the Labour Party?
My family's always been Labour Party supporters, and I've always had that in me to fight against the social injustices and really make a difference to people's lives. From a young age, I was involved in charities, and before I even got political, I always had an interest in politics, and it was always about helping people. It was always about making a difference and helping people that were less fortunate than me. And I think that's why I turned to the Labour Party, because I seen that was a party that you could really make a difference, and they have made a difference in various governments, and I wanted to be a part of that.
The social justice element of Labour then is what drew you in as a youngster?
Yeah, I would say the social justice element more than anything, and the progressive, thinking that everyone's welcome, and I really like that aspect that they're so inclusive to everyone, no matter anyone's background in society.
So when somebody says Labour to you, what does the word Labour mean?
It means a lot of things to me. First of all, you can really break it down and first talk about the workers and fighting for people's workers' rights. If you look at the early elements of the Labour Party and how it was founded, it was really founded on that sense of justice for the workers, because even today, in workplaces we've got the fire and rehire, and people get treated absolutely abysmal, and I think it's an absolute disgrace the way the workers get treated. And then you look at our elements of the Labour Party against social injustice, against racism, against any form of transphobia, homophobia, and I think that's what Labour encapsulates everything into one bubble to make people's lives better. I think that's what encapsulates more than anything. So I don't think it has one broad meaning. Although it started with back in the early 20th century about really about workers, but I think it's diverged into really making a society that everyone is equal and they'll all get the same opportunity, equality of opportunity.
Yeah, good. And where are you from? So where did you grow up and what is your local constituency Labour Party?
So I'm from Renfrew and I've grew up here. I've lived in Renfrew my whole life. So my local party is Renfrewshire North and West Labour Party. Again, it's a lot of great people in it, a lot of great activists. Again, most of the people, they all do charity work as well, so they have the same thoughts as me in the Labour Party. They want to go and make a difference and really help their community, and that's what I like about politics, when you actually are on the ground and you've done something, and you actually see it making a difference to someone's life. So it's always refreshing to see.
When did you first become an active member within the Renfrewshire North and West Labour Party?
I only became a member in about 2020. I was always a Labour supporter, but I wasn't an actual member. But I got to that stage where, I was going to be joining, going to be going to university, and I felt like I had to make a decision. I had to really go for it, and I was always going to join Labour. I've always supported Labour. I wouldn't vote for anyone else other than Labour, and I felt like, I should just go for it, and really put myself out there and try that I can, because that's the only way you can make a difference, is through the ballot box.
How old are you now? Just so the reason I ask is that I'm going to cast back to like Brexit and IndyRef to see if you were old enough to vote in them.
So I'm 21, so I wasn't old enough to vote in them, but I think both referendums help people like me become a lot more politically engaged, because if you look at even the turnout for the 2014 referendum, one of the highest turnouts we've ever had, and I think a lot of people have taken an interest in politics because of this, and because, especially Brexit as well, how much it's been on the news. I remember at one point, like maybe between 2017 to 2019, 2020, and early 2020, and that's what you heard in the news. It was just Brexit, 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 and people. I've read a lot of books about it, and people say, I'm not interested in politics, especially over COVID. They'll say, I'm not interested in politics, but they could tell you loads of what was happening. So a lot of people are taking an interest because, it's in their face all the time.
It's hard to avoid it, isn't it? You can't really. I think you, as a responsible citizen, you do kind of need to engage with it because it does impact your life. I think especially at the local council level.
It definitely is. I think people don't realise that most things in life are actually political. We don't actually look into it, but it's not until you maybe study politics or you have a deep interest into it that you actually realise that every decision that gets made, whether that be local or maybe countrywide in Westminster, that it all impacts people's lives. And talking about the council, I'm actually going to be standing as a councillor next year at the local elections. I've not been told what ward yet, but it will be for Renfrewshire.
Amazing. I was going to ask that later on if you had plans to stand, but there you've gazumped me. Well done. Good for you though. No, good for you. That's amazing. I think you're someone so young as well and clearly know your area. That's amazing.
Again, it all goes back to, really wanting to make a difference, and what better way to make a difference than being in that position to obviously make the decisions. So I'm really looking forward to going out and campaigning. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think it'll be quite hard to balance uni and all the rest of my extracurricular stuff, but I'm really looking forward to it because I've done quite a few campaigns now with Labour, so I'm looking forward to doing my own and organising it and setting out the way I want to do it.
Did you sort of join the Labour Club as soon as you became a fresher?
Yeah, as I was saying, that just before I joined uni, it was my last year of college, and I joined the Labour Party because I was thinking about doing it for a while, because I was already quite obviously politically engaged, but I just didn't join the Labour Party yet, and I always voted for them. So I was like, you know what, I may as well join and get active. So I did get active as soon as I joined. In first year, obviously, it was a wee bit different because COVID, so events were restricted to Zooms, which obviously isn't the most exciting, but I wanted to get as involved as I could in every aspect of the Labour Party, whether that be from obviously my local party to the student aspect to it as well.
What has been the most enjoyable aspect of the student Labour Party? Are there good people that are a part of the Glasgow Uni Labour Club?
Yeah, honestly, amazing people. It's been a really enjoyable experience because I'm running it. That's why I'm really looking forward to stands in council. I've got to do things the way I want to do things. Because I feel like before, the membership was pretty low, and I felt like it was all done by the book. But I wanted to make it a more enjoyable experience for students because at the end of the day, it was a political group, but I also wanted to make it a social group that people could make friends. I had a lot of people that were really shy at the start of it, and they're a lot more confident now because we've done a lot of training, on public speaking and door knocking and things that they should be concentrating on when we're going out campaigning. Whereas before, I just felt like it would just be like Zooms they would do, and on these Zooms you would just talk about what's been happening. But I think you need to teach people because you can't just send people on door knocking or doing public speaking without actually training them up because it can be daunting. And I've tried to do a pints and politics every 3 weeks, and we've had some great guests so far. We've had two pints and politics so far, and we've had some special guests. We've had three
So you
MSPs
played
and
a blinder with the
etc.
Paul Sweeney one. I think that's an amazing. I seen that, like the pictures that you. I didn't know it was framed as pints and politics, but I think you're saying there that making it enjoyable for people because then you're combining the social aspect and that people have social needs to integrate and engage with each other, and then you're bringing in MSPs and MPs. That's well done for that because that's the way. I think if you get the morale up, then when it comes to election times, then people are willing to sort of grind down and give you back the time that you've put into them. If that makes sense.
No, definitely. We've had Paul Sweeney, Pam Duncan Clancy, we've had Paul Kane, we've had Eva Murray, and it's been really enjoyable and it's been really informative for everyone as well because you're hearing from people who've made it to the top. Because there's obviously some people that are aspiring to get into politics, and what better way to get more involved when you're actually hearing from people who've achieved it. So I've that's my kind of I'm going to keep to that every 3 weeks and get guest speakers in. So I think I've heard a lot of good reports from it, and it's really enjoyable and it's good for people to network and meet the local MSPs and councillors, and I think it's I think it's the way to go. And also, I've also enjoyed one of the things I've most enjoyed that has been going out and recruiting new members because we've had an 80% now, 80% rise in membership, 80% rise in that short time that I've became chair, and that's really down to going out and doing things differently. I like doing things differently, and no one ever thought of these ideas before. They never thought of these ideas before. So I've literally went to all the student halls and I've been chatting doors, talking to people, giving leaflets out, try to get them to come to our events, and you know it's definitely worked. That's just one aspect that I've been doing, but I've just been trying to think out of the box. Like surely there's ways to recruiting people because you can put stuff online, but a lot of people don't see it. Your reach, you don't really get the reach when you've got just these pages that don't have a lot of likes. But now if you're actually going out and speaking to people, it looks like you actually you're caring more for one, and you're. I just think that's the best kind of activism is you're going out and speaking and meeting people, and it's definitely worked. And I'm looking forward to the next year. I think our membership still will go up even further.
People go on about or they discuss party activism as being grassroots. It sounds as though you are the definition, you are the embodiment of grassroots. The way that you're saying you go out and engage and network with people face to face, rather than an online presence. Because as you say, online will only get you so far. It's going out. It's the bread and butter of interacting with people that makes the lasting impressions.
I definitely think that's the way to go because there's a lot of people that get elected. You'll see it in Westminster, MPs are getting Holyrood as well, and they'll just neglect their constituents. You won't see them until election time again. I want to be out on the ground, talking to local organisations, talking to local people, try to fix problems. Try to fix the root cause of why something is the way they are. And I think that's the way to do it. I think by being out in the ground and speaking to people, that's when you're going to hear people's concerns. You're not going to hear it from, putting a Twitter post up, and you might get some replies under it, but that's not centred towards your actual constituency and your ward. So you really need to go out and be active, because we're public servants. The politicians are public servants, so they're there to serve the public. So if they aren't doing these things, then they aren't doing their job, in my opinion.
No, you're correct. You're correct. If we go back to 2020 August September time is when you'd have started uni. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
A lot has changed in the Labour Party and Scottish Labour in that time. So you've been through the Sarwar versus Lennon leadership election, and then the Scottish Government election afterwards. So if we go back to Sarwar and Lennon, did you back Sarwar or did you want Monica Lennon to be leader at the time?
I backed Monica Lennon at the time. It was purely on what I felt she was talking about for what they should do for students for a summer payment, and I felt that was a really good idea. But Sarwar's done a fantastic job. I think he's really turned around our fortunes. You can even see that with the election. You look at the polls in, maybe February with Scottish Labour. It was going to be an absolute car crash of an election. When Sarwar came in, and he's really turned it around.
Steadied the ship and he's kicked on. I would agree.
Yeah, it was really positive. Obviously, we're still in third place, but it could have been a whole lot worse, and we could have lost a whole lot more MSPs. And I think he's been a really competent leader. I think he's resonated well for the public, and I think one day he's going to become First Minister.
I think the time that he came in, it was a very, very difficult backdrop, and there was, as you say, the party was definitely going backwards in terms of the polls and even public perception. And I think he's been very firm but fair, certainly criticising and holding the government to account on things like the COVID handling and the COVID recovery. He's never, I think, people like Ruth Davidson, I think she can be too brash and brazen and shouty almost, whereas he's quite calm and measured, which I like a lot. I think that's an intelligent way to be.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that he's definitely held the government to account, especially over COVID, and more recently on the NHS. I was actually doing leaflets the week about that. We've got people waiting up to 48 hours for an ambulance. We've got 600 odd thousand people on the waiting list in the NHS. It's absolutely abysmal now. We look at the vaccine passport app. We could have literally just used the UK one, but the SNP decided to create their own, which didn't work for the first 2 days, and it cost 600,000 of the taxpayers' money. I think it's an absolute disgrace that money was wasted in that way when we could have used that money for something else, such as to subsidise people who've lost money due to the cut in universal credit, or something else that would actually benefit people's lives. I don't understand why we had to create our own app. It's just more money wasted by the SNP.
I think the SNP, it's funny that they would criticise, and they did criticise rightly, the Tories for the test and trace type fiasco when they themselves are in charge of this aspect, the NHS COVID Pass app. And as you say, they didn't need to use it because they had been offered use of the UK one and decided no, and spent 600,000 on something, as you say, doesn't work properly for a lot of people. SNP and Tories get more in common than they like to admit and like to think.
Yeah, they both get votes from, this independence question. That's why the Tories have done, so well in recent years in Scotland, because they stand firmly on unionism. And then we've got the SNP obviously firmly on, independence. So literally, had 2021 election, and there wasn't a lot of talk about policies. There was talk about if there was going to be a referendum or if there wasn't. And I think that's a sad state of affairs when an election is dictated on a constitutional question especially during a pandemic, and not talking about how we're going to improve people's lives after a pandemic. I think that says a lot for the state of Scottish politics right now.
Do you think Labour are the party that hurt most by that? Politics being a constitutional thing? Labour are the big losers in that situation?
Well, we are trying to argue for an alternative, and it's obviously difficult to argue for that because there's some people that are just set on independence, and there's some people just set on staying in the union. And I want to stay in the union, but I want to reform the union, and I think there obviously needs to be reform in the union, and obviously it's going to take a Labour government to do that, and we need to give more power to local councils and really empower people like that, because they are the people that know best what's happening, the problems in their community. They know how to resolve that better than people in Westminster or people in Holyrood. Take power out of Holyrood, put into Glasgow City Council or Renfrewshire City Council, because they'll be able to resolve these local issues better than someone in Edinburgh. But I want to stay in the union, 100%.
By the same token, then, see if, and I suspect it won't, but let's just say it does. Say Scotland did vote to become independent, and there's then an election after that to bring in the first sort of full-term parliament of an independent Scotland. Would you still be on board with the decentralisation of power, even within an independent Scotland? Would you chase the type of policy changes that you wanted to reform within the Union, just within an independent nation?
I always think decentralisation is better. I think that it empowers local people over bureaucrats, and I would always support decentralisation of power, because I think the power is better in local people's hands who know how to fix the local issues rather than a bureaucracy.
As we look ahead, do you think Labour's future is brighter? Do you think Scottish Labour, are trending in the right direction with Anas at the helm?
Oh yeah, I think they're definitely on the right direction. There's a lot of talent in Parliament as well, with the MSPs that have got elected. So I think that the SNP were very fortunate at that election, because I think every party that was in government during the 2021 elections, whether that be in Wales or Scotland or in England, they all done pretty well. So I think that was more of a COVID election that we couldn't really. It was a COVID election because look at Nicola Sturgeon, for instance. She was on the telly every single day. The people, for instance, activists, we weren't out, door knocking until like the last week and a half. It was very hard. So, the people in government had a real advantage in that election. I think Labour are going to be back on track. I think that Scottish Labour is definitely on the right direction. About door knocking, week on week, and I hear a lot of great reports about stuff that the MSPs have done, stuff that the local councils have done. I mean, my local MSP, Neil Bibby, he's done an absolutely fantastic job. The work he's doing, he's holding local surgeries every week. He's, he's door knocking, putting leaflets through the door, meeting, these different people in different areas in the west of Scotland. The activism I'm seeing from Scottish Labour is absolutely unbelievable now, and it's going to resonate in more seats. And I think the election of Anas Sarwar in 2026.
Obviously, the electoral system we've got here is the additional member system, and that means that it's nigh on impossible to get a majority. Would you be open to working with other parties, even let's say the SNP? Like, would you do a deal with the SNP to run Scotland, or would that be the type of thing that would be off the table completely?
No, I would never do a deal with any party, because I don't believe that's the way to go. I think that every party goes to an election with their own manifesto, and if you're going to work with our party, then you're going to be selling your manifesto off. You've seen that with the Green Party when they've joined up.
Yeah,
you've seen that with the Green Party with SNP. They're not even arguing against the Cambo oil fields and stuff. I think that any party that it does go into these coalitions, that they're going to have to sell all their pledges. So it's not something that I'd be willing to commit to. I'd rather, wait until we get elected and we'll make the changes that I feel that would be beneficial to the people.
Then navigate on a sort of issue by issue basis in government. I think what the SNP did from 2007 to 11, that's probably a mature way of doing it. It's just a shame that things have went so.
Yeah.
Things have become so tribal in the time since.
Yep. I think that the best way. I'm not a big fan of the system in Scotland. I don't think it works well, to be honest. I think we're going into that election campaign, and for how long we've had the Scottish Parliament, there's still stuff on the telly telling people how the election, the system works. I mean, it just shows you how complex it is because people still don't understand it. So I'm a big fan of First Past the Post, and I think it's not worked well.
Are you really? Are you really?
Yeah, I think it provides a strong, stable government. I think that it excludes extremist parties as well, which, I mean, you look at 2015 and UKIP got, I think, near enough 4 million votes, but they only get one seat. Just imagine that was in Scotland. They got, well, obviously wouldn't get that kind of vote, but if you compared that to Scotland, and if they got a vote share based on that population, they would have had a lot of seats. They would have had a lot of MSPs. So I think it's a good system.
But is that not the democratic will of the people?
Well,
though?
I think it's first past the post. It's it's been there for a long time, and I think it's a very democratic system, and it's worked. It's worked, and I think it will continue to work. Of course, we need some reform in the UK in certain aspects, but I think the voting system is fine.
Don't think that getting 39 to 40% of a vote and then getting 50 to 55% of the seats is fair, but at the same time, as you're saying, it does provide stability. It does provide stability, and it avoids this case where the Scottish election basically was decided on wait and see if the SNP fall one seat short of a majority, and then everything's having to change, things have to fall into place a completely different way. Whereas, at least as you say with First Past the Post, you generally know what you've got, and it's not too complicated to come up with a government.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of to and fro up here.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's just a more simplified system, and a lot of people aren't engrossed into politics, and they don't understand the system in Scotland. It's far too complex, in my opinion. Unless you're actually really involved in politics and perhaps even studying politics, you're not going to understand a lot of these systems. So the First Past the Post just makes it a lot easier for people. And again, I think it provides a strong, stable government in most cases, rather than something that we're getting. What we can sometimes get in Scotland, such as now we've got the SNP and Greens dominating the coalition, and I think it's an absolute mess.
We'll move on to the conference, Labour conference that was just happened about just less than a month ago, end of September.
Yep.
What's it like being what is it like being at a party conference? Was it your first, and whereabouts was it?
So it was in Brighton. It was my first. It was really exciting. I think someone described it as the Disneyland for politics, because everywhere you walk about, you'll see an MP, you'll see an MSP. You're actually a bit shell shocked because you're walking in, you're like, no way, that's so and so, and then you're walking down, and that's so and so, and you're wanting to get a photo with everyone, and you're like, I'm going to be here all day. I'm going to miss actually voting if I'm sitting here getting photos with everyone. But it was really good for meeting a lot of people and a lot of like-minded activists, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really good democratic process to vote on party policy and to hear obviously what the party was wanting to do and going forward. It was really amazing to hear Keir Starmer's speech. I thought it was one of the best speeches he's ever done. You could actually hear the standing ovation in the room. the party's so behind them, and I think in 2024 or maybe perhaps 2023 that we could see Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. I really do believe that.
Do you think the party is in a better place under Starmer than it was under Corbyn?
I think that the party is now more credible, and I think it's more ready for government, and I think it's going in the right direction.
Was there any policies under Corbyn that you were fond of?
I do think Corbyn had a lot of good policies. I do think that, firstly, the abolition of student fees. I don't think it's right that students down south are having to pay £9,500 to go to university. So once they're leaving uni, they've got this massive debt. I don't think that's right, especially when you look back at the 1990s when we didn't even have student loan. We didn't even need to pay to get into university. Didn't even have fees, and now on £9,500. I think that's unbelievable. I do believe that transport should be nationalised. I think that, especially in Scotland, ScotRail, it's an absolute mess. You're paying an absolute fortune to even go from Glasgow to Edinburgh. The trains are always late. And, I think that the whole system is flawed. I think that we should have nationalised transport. I really do believe in that.
Were there any exciting Labour policies that were discussed at conference that Starmer had brought up?
Well, I think in general, it wasn't direct policies he was talking about, but he was talking about different aspects about where the party should be moving forward, particularly on crime. I think that I think David Lammy spoke about it the day before, that we're going to get tougher on rapists and these sexual predators, which is absolutely right. Keir Starmer mentioned that only 2% of rapists end up in prison. I think that's an absolute disgrace. I think it's a slap in the face to women's rights. And, why are we so lenient towards these people? I just don't understand it. I think we're far too lenient in this country. I think we need to get tougher on crime because, we've even got up in Scotland, they're talking about building a £400 million jail. £400 million jail. That 400 million could have went into, a brand new school or, again, or social services. I just can't believe it. I think that we're far too lenient. Keir Starmer also spoke about patriotism, and I think that was really important because we need to show we are patriotic. We love this country. I think, we need to show that we do love the UK. I think that the Conservatives always try make out that they're the party that's of patriotism, but I would question them now and say, is it patriotic to not feed kids during the pandemic? Is it patriotic to do these kind of things? I don't think so. You can't just fly flags and say and neglect the neediest, cutting universal credit. Is that patriotic? I don't think so. Sending millions of people in poverty. So when I talk about patriotism, I think that Labour aren't the party that's just going to wave flags, but they're a party that's going to make policies that are going to improve people's lives, and that's an important thing of patriotism. Yes, you can wave flags, but there needs to be substance behind it.
Like, one of the main criticisms of Labour that you hear from the Tories is to do with fiscal irresponsibility, that Labour weren't and shouldn't be trusted with the sort of public purse strings. Why would Labour be a fiscally responsible party of government?
Well, let's first talk about the 2019 manifesto, and there are certain aspects that I don't agree with that linked in with this. So first of all, in the 2019 manifesto, we talked about taxing people, on I think it was above 85 grand a year. I don't agree with the kind of policies. I think that people on wages such as 85 grand a year, that's somewhere great surgeons or doctors or real medical heroes. In all aspects that people have worked really hard. So I'm not a big fan of taxing these kind of people in that kind of wage bracket. But I do believe that the big corporations should be paying their fair share. Not a deterrent for investment, but I do believe that companies like Amazon should be paying more in corporation tax, because how can it be just that someone, well, let's look at the recent tax rises. How can someone on 20 or 30 grand be getting more money charged, but companies like Amazon don't? So there'll be ways to implement the kind of policies that we want to do in government, and it's not going to be about taxing working people. It's going to be about making people pay their fair share. And I think that's an important element, that Labour are not going to be irresponsible and just spend money that's unnecessarily. We'll spend money that needs to be spent, such as on the health service, money that needs to be spent to actually improve people's lives. It's not just going to be about nationalisation or anything. It's going to be about putting money into the policing, to put money into education, or the health service. I think that's an important element to remember. It's not going to be that we're going to get elected and going to give freebies out and try and nationalise. It's not going to be like that. We're going to be very responsible and really cater to people's needs.
Good. How electable would you say Labour are under Keir Starmer?
I think that they're very electable. I think that they're at the stage now where you're really looking at government in the next couple of years. I think we've got the policies there. If you look at Conservatives, the credibility is dwindling. Even the international stage, you said when we had Brexit, we were going to be global Britain, but since then we've had a cut to aid. What does that say for our involvement in the world, to actually helping the people, the world's neediest? So I think that Labour are the party of the future. I think that people can see that. Look at Fiery Hire. People are so mistreated in workplaces, and people are getting overworked in health service, understaffed in schools. So I think that people are starting to notice these things, and they're starting to turn their head and saying, what, I want an alternative. We've had so many years of this now, and there's only so many years that they can put up with it. It's all the lies and all the false promises. They want someone that's going to be a credible leader, who's going to lead them out of the pandemic, and I think that man is Keir Starmer. I think he's done a really good job so far. He's had a difficult job, coming in during a time where a global pandemic. It's going to be hard to go out and campaign and meet people. A lot of it was done over Zoom, but I think now he's found his feet, and the party's definitely on the right direction.
Realistically, can Labour form a government at the next election, or do you suspect it will take 2 or 3 elections to recover from the 80-seat majority that the Tories have?
I think that they will form a government in the next election, and a lot of these 80 seats, you'll hear it all the time, that people lent the Conservatives a vote, but they lent them the vote because of Brexit, and they were promised the levelling up. There hasn't been any levelling up. It's all talk and no substance, and that's the issue with the Conservatives. So I think people will be looking at it the next election saying that, I voted for something different and nothing different happened. But I think they'll be going back to Labour, and Keir Starmer's definitely providing an alternative. Again, most of the people that voted, obviously in North England, etc., was due to Brexit, and they wanted Brexit done, and they felt instead the fact that we were not going to implement the referendum's result, which I think was a shocking policy. I think that people voted to leave the European Union, where you wanted to remain or leave. The fact that that's democracy, and if people voted for that, then we should have implemented it. So this, second referendum and all that was just a lot of nonsense.
Is there or is there not a mandate for a second independence referendum?
No, because just because people vote SNP doesn't mean they want independence. There's a lot of people that vote SNP because they might like some of the policies, but just that doesn't mean that that's that's a way to push through for another referendum. And you actually look at the 2019 SNP, the whole manifesto was, our main heading was, vote SNP and you'll stop Brexit. Well, that was never going to happen, even if they won 59 seats. But then after winning, I think it was 48 or 49 seats, they were trying to push through and saying, we've got a mandate. There was no mandate there. They literally claimed that it was to stop Brexit. Even if they won the 59 seats, they wouldn't have stopped Brexit, but they were trying to use these people's votes as an indication that they could now push through for another referendum, even though it wasn't even mentioned.
So could you not then say that there are people who voted the Labour, that voting Labour doesn't necessarily mean that you are against independence?
No, I do understand. I do understand where you're coming from, but there's not. I don't think there's a mandate for it. I think that there's a mandate to have better public services now. I think it's absolutely abysmal. You even look at Glasgow City Council; they can't even empty the bins. I mean, that worries me. What an independent Scotland would be like if we can't do the basics. But obviously, there'll be a big clean up for COP, and even the Greens and the SNP and coalition. I think that's all a show for COP. It's like Nicola Sturgeon's all progressive and everything. It's all a show. There's no mandate for it, and I don't think they'll have a referendum. And I don't even think they want a referendum. I have a theory that it's just a power thing. They'll just use this every election because nothing's going to change from election to election. SNP will say, vote for us for a referendum. They won't deliver a referendum, and then they'll complain about Westminster being anti-democratic, and then in a couple of years' time, when we have another election, the same will happen, and the SNP are still in power. It's all about power.
You aren't the first to have said that. Actually, that's a good point, because if it gets to when's the next Scottish Parliament election, 2026. So if they don't even attempt to deliver or pass a referendum bill, then can they really go back to people in 5 years' time and say, "Oh, if you vote for us, we'll give you a referendum"? When they had 5 years, they had the other pro-independence party in power with them, and still did nothing.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Nothing is changed. Nothing is going to change. I think people are just sick of hearing about it now. I personally am. I want to talk about the day job. We've got places in Glasgow. We can't even open the libraries, but we're talking about a constitutional question. Now, I don't understand about how independence solves anything, because it doesn't. Because most of the powers that the Scottish Parliament have, they can make a difference to people's lives. For instance, you could lift millions out of child poverty from doubling and then tripling the Scottish child payment, which Scottish Labour have been advocating for. And they were actually, the SNP a couple of years ago were offered more powers on social security. They said it was going to take about 10 years to implement. So I just don't know what difference independence is going to make, apart from probably less companies wanting to come and invest here, and potentially a hard border. I don't see us getting into the EU that easily as well. I mean, there's countries waiting 10 plus years to get in. There's a lot of things to look around that way, but I just don't understand what benefit it's going to bring Scotland. I just don't understand it.
What would it take for you to change your mind on independence?
Nothing. I genuinely don't change my mind. And I'm open-minded. I'm very open-minded, but I've assessed all arguments to it, and quite thoroughly. And I just don't believe. If I believed that it was going to make a difference in people's lives, I'd be for it. But it won't. We've literally got the powers right now to make a difference. Of course, in Westminster things have been better, but in Scotland, we literally have a lot of powers to make a difference. And to say that we're going to leave, one of the most successful unions in the world because, one or two bad governments, but just think about the good governments. Let's look at the 1945 Labour government that, brought in the NHS and, really made quite a profound difference to people's lives, or the Labour government, which introduced policies such as, tax credits and winter heating allowance and, Good Friday agreements. It really benefited people. Are we really going to give up these things. Just the fact that we've got one bad Tory government, I think it'd be insane to do that.
The way that you say independence wouldn't help people's lives, what reforms can you seek that would help their lives?
Well, first of all, in a federalist UK, I believe that the House of Lords should be an elected chamber. I don't think it should be abolished, but I do think there should be an electability there. I don't think that anyone should just be able to get a peerage. I believe that Scotland should get more representation at Westminster. I've seen that the boundary review this week, they're talking about actually cutting two MPs, one actually from the Glasgow region. I feel we're vastly underrepresented in Westminster as it is, but I believe that the main points is, decentralisation to, mayors and local government, local councils, giving them more powers over perhaps welfare payments, because each area is different. We've got very affluent areas in the UK, and we've got areas in the UK that stricken by poverty. So I think the way to do that is a case by case status, because we can't judge them all the same, because every constituency, every city is different. They've all got their own issues that they deal with. I think there'll be a lot of bureaucracy in it, but I think if we could work it well, it would really make a difference to people's lives. I really do. Pushing power out of Westminster, pushing power out of Horrid, to local communities, because some of these local organisations, they're so undervalued. They're so undervalued. They do so much. You actually don't realise until you go and work with them and volunteer the difference they make to people's lives. Some of the differences they make to people's lives is far greater than help that Holyrood or Westminster ever provide. And it's that personal relationship, between the organisation, that personally get to know these people. And I think, we need that more in politics. Like, for instance, in local government, that we can, if we push the power out and people, the first line of contact, perhaps like a councillor, I think that's definitely the way to go.
Brings me nicely then on to my last question, since you sprung on me that you're going to be running for councillor. Having said all these things, Jamie, what can people expect from you?
Well, everyone will get treated equally. Fairness, dignity, respect, and being at the beck and call to help my constituents, because as a public servant, that's your duty. I want to go out, meet local people, speak to local organisations, really make a difference, leave a mark, and say, like, I've done this, I've done that. I think sometimes we, in politics, what we do is they'll maybe fix something, but we won't fix the root cause of it. And I was actually thinking about this with an organisation that I've helped with for a while. It's Team Up to Clean Up, it's called. So it's really going out and litter picking and helping the environment. And we sometimes go to the same area all the time, and you can go the next day and be cleaning up all night, and you can go the next day or the day after, and then the mess is back. And I actually thought something in my head. I thought, why is it like that? Because we're cleaning it up, and then how's it getting so bad so fast? And I thought, it's because we're not fixing the root problem. Maybe the root problem is, we need to put a bin in there. We need to fix, the root issue. And I think in politics, sometimes you can maybe fix something by, giving a payment over, or, a welfare payment or something. But if you're not fixing the root problem, that there's going to be a recurring issue there, and really fixing, the root problems in society. And again, that goes down to activism and speaking to people. We can't just make policy. I think far too often policies are made without actually delegating that with the individuals that you're going to be helping, because you need to look at the root issue, to eradicate that problem, or else it's just going to just endure. But that's the kind of politics that I'll be doing. Local activism, help my community, fighting for social justice, everything along the lines, and just being there for people. I think far too often people get elected and then they forget who elected them, and they'll never be one of the politicians. They'll be one of the ones that are there 24/7, ready to help.
Good man. I'm looking forward to seeing that, because you're good on Twitter anyway, so you'll take it up another notch. Looking forward to that and seeing how you get on. But where can people find you? So if you're Twitter, Instagram, if people want to check you out and have a good read, because you're a good follow, then where can they see you?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So it's just James McGuire, and then it's 2 underscores on Twitter. So anything politics, it'll be on there.
And that's a wrap. A massive thank you to this week's guest for coming onto the show. I hope you all enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed chatting. All of the relevant social media accounts can be found in the show notes. The usual bits and pieces from me to see you out. The best way to keep up to date with the latest goings on relating to Lost for Words is to follow using the handle @LostForWordsPod on both Twitter and Instagram. Send a message on either Twitter or Instagram if you have anything you'd like to ask a guest, or for a guest suggestion, or even just to leave any feedback. The best way to support the show is to hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and if you use an Apple device, a 5-star review in the podcast app would be amazing. If you like what you hear, tell someone. Word of mouth also helps us to grow. Finally, to round off, all of your support and continued listening is genuinely appreciated. It means a lot to me to have you on this journey too. I am your host Jason, and I hope to have you back next week for another episode of the Lost for Words podcast.